Italy's ruling coalition is on the rocks. Matteo Salvini calls the partnership quits and pushes for snap elections, a move the Prime Minister says Salvini will have to justify to Parliament. U.S. immigration officials say they've released around half of the nearly 700 people detained in a mass raid. The crackdown left children alone and scared as they came home from school to find their parents missing. And the UN calls on India and Pakistan to exercise maximum restraint over Kashmir. Narendra Modi defended his move to revoke the region's special status, saying it was in the best interest of the people. Welcome back to the France 24 newsroom here in Paris. Thank you for joining us. We begin in Italy, where the tension in the ruling coalition erupted this Thursday, with far-right Interior Minister Matteo Salvini trying to pull the plug on his coalition with the populist Five Star Movement. At the heart of the disagreement is a project to build a high-speed rail link with France. Salvini's League supports the plan, which is opposed by the populists of Luigi Di Maio. Simon Harding has the details.
It's a scenario Italians are well accustomed to, their government on the verge of collapse. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte said that Matteo Salvini, the leader of the far-right League, wished to break up the coalition.
The Interior Minister Matteo Salvini came to see me and told me that he intended to break up the government's coalition. He wants to head to the polls to take advantage of the support that his party currently holds. Per capitalizzare il consenso di cui il partito attualmente gode.
Despite being in a coalition with the Five Star Movement, Salvini has repeatedly sought to gain the upper hand on his political counterpart. He says his alliance with Luigi Di Maio is dead after the pair fell out over a high-speed rail link to France.
We've already spent the money to pierce through a mountain so a train can pass through. It'll take trucks off the roads. Does it make more sense to finish this work or to go back? Italians need to travel in a way that doesn't just create more and more pollution.
Now, both parties are calling for a government reshuffle. If the current administration does collapse and the opposition does not find a solution, snap elections could be called for October. Alternatively, President Sergio Mattarella could put in place a caretaker government until the next scheduled elections in 2023.
For more on Italy's latest political turmoil, we spoke to our correspondent in Rome, Josephine McKenna. She explained the political strategy behind Salvini's call for new elections.
I think Matteo Salvini knows that he's in a very strong position. The recent polls show that he has around 38% of the vote. That's double where he and his party were a year ago. And in contrast, the Five Star Movement has fallen to around 15 or 16%. So its popularity is halved from where it was a year ago. So Matteo Salvini is watching those polls. He knows he's in a strong position. He's out there on the beaches conducting a kind of a beach campaign at the moment while Italians are on vacation. And he knows that he can push ahead with elections, confident that he can possibly form a coalition. If he doesn't have 40% of the vote, enough to govern on his own, he can form a coalition with other right-wing parties that will take him across the line and allow him to push ahead with some of the policies that he wants to go ahead with. This week, we saw a very divisive parliament when the Five Star Movement opposed the high-speed rail link between Turin and Lyon. That is a project that the League favours, and it's an indication of just the divisions between these two major parties in the coalition government in Italy at the moment. So definitely teetering on the brink of collapse, and we're likely to see that government collapse in the next few days, I think, if we see movement in the parliament.
Over to the United States, where officials say they have released nearly half of the people detained Wednesday in mass immigration raids. Some 680 people were arrested in the crackdown at multiple food processing plants in the state of Mississippi. Immigration and Customs Enforcement says some 300 of them have since been released to await court dates. It came as Latinos in the U.S. are still reeling from a shooting in El Paso, Texas, that targeted Hispanics. The immigration raids sparked criticism after reports that children were left alone without their parents.
Upset and distressed. These children found out their parents had been arrested after school, with many of them homeless, with nowhere to go. Community leaders have volunteered to take care of them, but so far the kids have been inconsolable.
My dad didn't do nothing. He's not a criminal or something. That's what the immigrants took them. Please let him free. The governments, please put your heart. Let my parents be free with everybody else, please.
The mayor of Mississippi's capital, Jackson, has branded the raid as dehumanizing, whilst Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris said that the operation was designed to terrorize communities. However, Trump supporters and local officials hit back at critics, saying that they were simply upholding the law.
We have set another record, this time in what is believed to be the largest single-state immigration enforcement operation in our nation's history. Right now, these individuals who were detained are being processed, and based upon that process, based upon their criminal history, based upon their status in our thresholds in our office, we will determine at a later date who we prosecute criminally.
The crackdown follows a pledge made by Donald Trump to tackle illegal immigration, the president announcing back in June that several big operations were underway. The investigation leading to this particular raid reportedly took over a year to complete.
Now for the latest on the situation in Kashmir, the UN is urging India and Pakistan not to take any steps that could affect the special status of the disputed territory. Kashmir has been on lockdown since India announced on Monday they were revoking the region's autonomy. Pakistan says the move violates international law, but that they have ruled out military conflict. Meanwhile, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke this Thursday for the first time to defend the controversial step.
As a family, you, I, and the whole nation have taken a historic decision. Our brothers and sisters from Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh had been deprived of their rights in a great obstacle to their development. Now, this obstacle has been removed as a result of all our efforts.
Disagreement over the ownership of Kashmir has caused 70 years of hostility between India and Pakistan. Sanam Shantier takes a look back at the history of the territorial dispute.
India and Pakistan, nuclear-armed neighbours whose relations have been poisoned by a hotly contested region since 1947. That's when the two countries gained their independence from Britain. The area in question was once known as the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. At the time, the Muslim-dominated territory opted for independence, refusing to join Delhi or Islamabad. But within months, after a string of attacks by Pakistani tribesmen, the restive states signed an agreement acceding to India. This led to the first war between the two nations. 2 years on, in 1949, India and Pakistan signed a UN-backed ceasefire deal. Peace was short-lived. A second war followed in 1965. With the two countries alternating between moments of calm and phases of intense hostility, more fighting erupted in 1971. A year later, the Simla Agreement ended the conflict, establishing a line of control between Indian-controlled Kashmir and Pakistan-controlled Kashmir. This now serves as a de facto border between the two countries. According to observers, the current insurgency began in 1989 when Islamist militants began an uprising in Indian-controlled Kashmir. Tens of thousands of people have since been killed as a result. 1999 and another brief but bitter conflict between India and Pakistani-backed forces. This led to the Indian army deploying thousands of troops across the border. With tensions boiling in the mid-2000s, negotiators painstakingly put together a roadmap for resolution. Over a decade later, in 2014, India's then newly elected Prime Minister Narendra Modi closed all doors for dialogue with Kashmiri politicians. And so an uptick in border skirmishes that began in late 2016 and continued to 2018, killed dozens and displaced thousands of civilians on both sides of the line of control. Now, relations between the rival powers have been once again strained since February 2019, when Pakistan reportedly shot down 2 Indian fighter jets over Kashmir and captured one of the pilots. India said that it had retaliated by shooting down a Pakistani jet. Islamabad released the captive pilot in March and the situation calmed. But India's Kashmir vote has inflamed tensions once again.
Now, you don't have to become a vegetarian, but eating less meat and dairy is key to fighting climate change. The call to action comes from the UN after the release of its latest climate report. France 24's Thomas Waterhouse brings us the details.
Our planet is getting hotter, and the number of people living on it is increasing. But feeding this growing population whilst curbing global warming is proving to be a difficult balancing act to perform, with 23% of man-made CO2 emissions stemming from the likes of agriculture and forestry. As they faced the cameras in Geneva on Thursday, the IPCC warned of a vicious circle, one where human-caused climate change is damaging the soil we live from, and where the way we use the land is making global warming worse.
Land is undergoing human pressure, and land is part of the solution, but land cannot do it all.
The way we produce food and what we eat contributes to the loss of natural ecosystems and declining biodiversity.
Increasing impacts on land are projected in the future.
108 experts from 52 countries came together to author the 1,000-page report, which details how our appetites are sucking the soil dry on over 70% of the Earth's ice-free land. The scientists say they were tasked to produce evidence and not offer recommendations, but they still stress that we should put more plant-based foods and less meat on our forks, and that we should limit the amount of food that's thrown away.
Reducing food loss and waste can reduce pressure on land, improve food security, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
The IPCC hopes this report will act as a guiding light for governments who'll be meeting for the UN's climate change conference in Chile this December.
Earlier, France 24 spoke with one of the scientists from the IPCC, which drafted that report. Jean-François Susana told us more about what his team learned over the course of their study.
We start with better understanding of the interrelations between these big challenges that are food security. We have currently more than 800 million people chronically undernourished, but also the land degradation. We have a quarter of our land which is degraded, and desertification, where we have 500 million people that are exposed to desertification. And we try to understand how in the future we could change and improve the situation. Improving this situation relies on a set of options. And those options, we can say, are partly sustainable land management. It's really greening the land. How could we protect our forests? How could we halt deforestation? How could we green the agricultural land, having soil protection, vegetation cover throughout the year? And how then could we also alter our demand of food, fiber, in order to cope with a more sustainable land management? And there you could reduce your waste and losses of food. You could change your diets, particularly having less meat products, based on the fact that in the OECD countries, we are eating excess meat and animal products according to the recommendations for nutrition of the Health Organization, of the World Health Organization.
We're going to have to leave it there for this edition, but do stay with us here on France 24. More news coming up in just about 15 minutes.